Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Amanda Benton, Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Marist and a graduate from the class of 2011. We're very excited to share this panel with you this afternoon featuring a number of alumni currently living in the greater Philadelphia area. Due to the number of participants, we have muted all lines except for the panelists. In order to ask questions, please use the chat feature. You can send to all panelists or directly to Scott Mcveigh, who is our moderator for this evening. I am putting a note in the chat right now so that you can see where the chat shows up. As it says there, if you are having technical difficulties, you can either message me through the Q&A feature, and if you're having audio problems, you can use that phone and access code that I just put into the chat box. There are several ways you can view this presentation on a desktop computer or laptop. There should be view options at the top center of your screen. If you are using a cell phone, you will need to swipe between the chat and Q&A feature and viewing people's screens, just so you know. So to get started, I'd like to welcome our moderator this afternoon. Scott Mcveigh graduated from Marist in 1991 with a degree in communication, and he was a member of the varsity swim team on campus. He recently became an industry principal at ANA after working as VP of Service Delivery at Deloitte for the last 5 years. He was instrumental in starting the Philadelphia chapter of the Marist Alumni Association and is currently the president of the chapter. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today and helping us moderate this panel.
Well, thank you, Amanda, and thank you to everyone for joining us. A little something about the Philadelphia chapter, as Amanda mentioned, we started that about 1.5 years ago, and our timing was amazing that, our very first event was going to be last year at the MAC tournament in AC. So we haven't had an official first-person event yet, but we've done a number of these online events as we started to come together as a virtual community and start to get to know each other. So very excited about where we're going with this, and I think the professional development series that we're doing here, the Marist Mentor Marketplace, is really becoming a model for the rest of the Alumni Association for the other chapters. So I'm very happy that you're all here today and look forward to seeing you at future chapter events. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. So Eric Welsh is the Executive Director of Global Marketing at BAYADA Home Health Care, where he oversees digital innovation and attraction strategies. He spent more than 15 years developing and directing strategic nationwide marketing and recruiting initiatives, and knows what truly drives conversions, impacts social media, and what builds a brand. He is a 2020 Sammy Award winner for Organization of the Year and 2020 WMA Award winner for Best Employment Website. He's frequently asked to speak throughout the country and has been a part of the 2019 Pennsylvania Marketing Summit, the Northeast E-Commerce Summit, and the Indeed Employer Brand Series. He graduated from Marist in 2002 with a Bachelor's in Multimedia and Fine Arts. Ed Nini is Global Head of Product for the Asset Management Business of Principal Financial Group. His team is responsible for developing, enhancing, and managing Principal's lineup of investment products in accordance with the ongoing needs of financial intermediaries and investors around the world. Ed is a recognized executive in the asset management industry with nearly 2 decades of experience across a variety of product, marketing, and sales leadership positions. Prior to joining Principal, he spent the bulk of his career growing the exchange traded fund, or ETF, businesses for some of the most successful and recognized firms in the industry. He most recently served as Senior Vice President and Head of ETF Investment Marketing and Strategy at Oppenheimer Funds, and led iShares marketing for BlackRock's U.S. Wealth Advisory business. Earlier in his career, Ed held several retail, institutional, and retirement marketing management positions at Vanguard and Dow Jones. He earned his bachelor's degree in communications from Marist and an MBA from St. Joe's University. See, these comms majors, we're all over it, right? Patricia Tow is a certified PMP working at Fidelity Investments as a technology project manager. In this role, she plays a dual certified Scrum Master for 2 agile implementation teams, the non-retirement and withholding tax forms team and the 1099 consolidated tax team. Prior to her current role, she worked as a software engineer developer and associate mainframe developer, also for Fidelity. She graduated from Marist in 2012, where she majored in computer information systems with a business administration minor. She was part of many clubs, but mostly involved in the Marist Dance Ensemble, where she also served as a choreographer and website manager. Greg Luna leads the trademark group at DuPont, where he has worked for more than 28 years. He previously held positions as trademark specialist and litigation paralegal. Greg graduated from Marist in 1985 with a bachelor's in political science. He was also a member of Marist Student Government and MIPO. As a student, he had an internship with the New York State Assembly. He also received an MPA from Rutgers University. So with that, we're going to get going. I welcome everyone, the panel. So I think we're going with Eric, right?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
So, hi everybody, my name is Eric Welsh. So thank you for that great intro. That was pretty cool. So I work for BAYADA, which is a family-run company. For 45 years, it's been privately held. It's 26,000 employees, serving 34,000 number of clients each week, and 22 states, 345 offices in 8 countries. And, you know, I'm here to talk to you today about sort of the 10-year checkpoint and what that looks like for me. And if you are going into a new career, what you should ask yourself as you go in, because it's kind of the same things that you want to ask yourself at the 10-year checkpoint. So there's 3 key elements to what I would consider a successful evolution in a single employer. And I'm going to talk through that. So it's a lot of internal things. It's really about you and not the organization, to be frank. But first, so if you're getting to a point in your career, if you're starting in your career, I think that it's always crucial to do a very thorough self-assessment. Are all the things that you thought that you were doing or liked to do when you started your career the same things that you're doing now? Often you can get caught in the swirl of everything that you've been doing, and 5 years goes by and it seems like 5 months, and all of a sudden you're at 10 years and am I still the same person that I thought I was, doing the same things that I thought I'd like to do? So that thorough self-assessment is some things like, do you prefer working with objects or people? Do you prefer working on strategies or executing them? And, you know, when I started my career, out of school, I started an ad agency, and I was very much a people upfront person. I was the pitch guy, the glad handing, and what I've turned into is very much the more strategic Al type of persona, where I often now I see my earlier self when people come to me with ideas, and it's really an interesting evolution. So are you detail oriented or a big thinker? So, you know, you have to find yourself, and as you grow and you get to this decade point, and Greg's going to talk about his longevity with a 28-year career at the same company, and I'm interested to see if there's some parallels. But are you still a big picture person, or are you detail driven? So that's why I went into sales and marketing, because I was at that point very much a sales guy. And as I grew and I was hired to start the digital program at BAYADA, we hadn't touched our website in over a decade, and it really turned into a labor of love. And so what happened there was I had some other questions, like what was my motives for working there? And, you know, when you're in your 20s, money is the motive. You don't have any money. You're working to get enough money so you can feel like you're starting to make it. But now it's different for me. And I think that if I had changed my thinking earlier, I may have found the work even more rewarding. But for me now, it's to see things take form, have impact, create positive change. You know, when I was a consultant, I was going from company to company, planting these seeds of change, but I never got to see them flourish. And now it's really the most rewarding thing, is that I know that something I did 2 years ago has had a major, massive impact on the business and the families that we serve today. So that's the first thing, is at this point, do another thorough self-assessment. Are you who you think you are, or you have this opportunity to change and redirect and pivot your career. So number 2 are your goals. Often the goals that you think of are a little bit different than goals you have as you're starting your career. Now you start thinking about your family, and do I want to travel more? Do I want to get more culture in my life? Do I want to pick up a self-sustaining hobby that will make me feel like I can get my creativity going again? Those are the things that often are put and swept aside when you're in your first years of your career, because you're really focusing on the grind. And I've found that those that had that outlet through the grind period are much more secure place now, because they know their work-life balance and it's always been there. I found it a little bit challenging to transition into a better work-life balance, because I had been grinding for, seriously about 15 years, but with BAYADA for those 10 years, because I was getting everything established digitally for the company. So that's another thing that I've written down as at my 10-year review of the things that I wanted to tell my CEO and my boss. I report directly to the CEO. These are the things that I personally want to achieve. And I'm going to need that in my life to make this work. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about another conversation I had with him after that. And then finally, organizational opportunities. When you're starting out, organizational opportunities are abundant. You kind of know your career path, but as you get higher into an organization, those opportunities sort of pinch out. You can only get to a certain point where you're highly compensated, but you also there isn't really another step above you. So I think that where you have to sort of navigate the discussion is, where can I create roles for myself? Or you speak to your employer and say, hey, where do you see me going? I've given you 10, I'll give you 10 more, and I'll enjoy every second of it, but I need to know that the commitment is two-way. So in my case, I was lucky that I was hired to start the work that I do now, which is I lead a team of 40 folks focused on digital advertising. But 10 years ago, I was hired, it was just me, and we didn't have a Facebook page, and we didn't have a Glassdoor profile. We weren't on Indeed. We were really a paper company trying to expand and to serve millions of people worldwide. So in that, I was really lucky that I could sort of carve out what I needed it to be. And the CEO at that time, who's my current CEO's father, really was open to it. And he created a really data-driven, trusting environment where if I could create an ROI, he would give me more money to fund the growth of my department. So really what I think finally, because we're getting close to the end of my time, is there's 2 things that I think you need to do. Raise your hand when asked, does anyone want to take this on? Because that's opened so many doors for me. I was able to create a publishing house for my company and publish books under the BAYADA Press, which I've never would have experienced or anticipated in my entire career that I would be a publisher. But also I've been able to work with people from 8 different countries and really open up my eyes to the way healthcare is provided across the planet. And then the other thing that I think is probably just as important is at your 10-year mark, you have to, if you want to stay at where you are, whoever you're reporting to, you have to sit them down and say, I am here, I've put 10 years of my time in, I need to know that you are committed to growing out the function, this was for me, the function of advertising and digital marketing with a commitment to growing the effort of the organization even further. That type of very vulnerable and direct talk with leadership shows that you're confident in what you do, you're mature enough to have that heady conversation, and finally that, listen, you're in a place where you have options, but you're choosing to stay. So with that, that's sort of my 10-year breakdown, and I'm open for any questions at the end. So thanks.
Great, thank you, Eric. Next up, we have Ed to discuss managing up.
Great, thanks, Scott. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So when I began my career after graduating from Marist, I had this mentality that my hard work alone would speak for itself. And for the first few years of my career, that approach was pretty effective. I received good performance reviews, was promoted, received increased compensation, but my progression through the ranks stagnated once I took a middle management position at a new firm. And I didn't understand why. I still maintained the same strong work ethic that I had all along, exceeded my goals, received good performance reviews. But at the same time, several of my peers who didn't appear to be working nearly as hard as I was were getting promoted. So I did what I always tend to do during times like this in my career. I read a handful of leadership books and career success books to find some answers. And what I found was that there was one glaring flaw in my career development strategy, and that was the ability to effectively manage up. And that's the focus of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So what does managing up mean? Amanda, if you don't mind, go to the next slide. The Harvard Business Review defines managing up as being the most effective employee you can be, creating value for your boss and your company. So it's not what many people perceive it to be. Frankly, early on in my career, I viewed it as, kissing up or sucking up or a form of manipulation or even an excuse not to be productive. That's not what it is. In its simplest form, managing up involves establishing a good working relationship with your boss so you both can be successful. That's essentially the crux of it. Now, regardless of the industry you work in or which organizations you work for, there are good managers and bad managers. Let's face it, the likelihood of you're currently going to have or will have a bad manager is pretty much inevitable. I've had my share. In fact, a recent Gallup study found that companies fail to hire or promote managers with the right talent for the job approximately 82% of the time. That's really incredible. And unfortunately, a bad boss can result in dissatisfaction with your job, disengagement from your company, primary reason why people end up leaving their organizations. It's really unfortunate. While managing up can help bring out the positive traits in bad managers, it's not necessarily a strategy you implement to correct those flaws. So you're not trying to correct the flaws of a bad manager or manipulate them to get them to do what you want them to do. Instead, it's a way to build and enhance your relationship with them so you can be successful together. In the example I shared at the beginning about my own career stagnation, my dilemma at the time occurred during a period where I had 6 managers in 4 years. So 2 per year. I actually didn't have a manager that gave me the same manager gave me a mid-year review and end-of-year review. So I was constantly starting over. I found that in those situations, managing up is especially important when you have a new manager or you're in a new work environment. But I found the following 6 tactics you see on the screen here to be beneficial in any manager-employee relationship. So I'm just going to quickly run through them so you guys have some action items to follow up with this on. Number 1, understand your manager's communication preferences. So ask questions like, how often do they want updates from you? Do they prefer email, calls, video, or when we ever get back to normal, in-person conversation? And do they want to be aware of everything going on or just the things that they need your assistance on? Asking them these simple questions takes the guesswork out of communicating with your boss and ultimately makes their and your life a lot easier. Number 2, find out what motivates them. What has driven their success in the past? What are they focused on now? What causes them pain or stress? Where are they feeling pressure from and why? Getting this clarity will put you in their shoes. And when you have perspective from their shoes, you better understand what makes them tick tick and why they act or frankly react the way that they do. Number 3, align your goals. Make sure that you know what they expect from you, what your priorities are, and set your goals accordingly. Your goals should ideally align with the goals of your manager. So if you don't have that transparency today from them, ask them to share it with you. Let them know that you want to ensure that your performance is tied to their success. Number 4, present solutions, not just problems. This was probably one of the biggest things that I encountered early in my career, where you just always want to deliver that laundry list of problems to your manager. The job of your manager is not to solve all your problems. And you're certainly not making their life easier by just presenting them problems for them to solve. So before coming to them with a problem you encountered, think through a potential solution or two that they can react to, right? It shows you have initiative to solve a problem on your own, and they'll have greater trust in your decision-making as a return. Number 5, offer feedback, but selectively and respectfully. As your relationship grows with your manager, and this happens in a sequence, right? So as you continue to evolve that trust, there's certain topics that you may want to consider bringing to your manager's attention as constructive feedback. For example, a couple examples, you might want to ensure that they're aware of the potential negative impact of a decision they're thinking of making, right? Maybe they don't see the whole picture, or maybe even a perception you're going to have with the broader team. Another example could be you want to understand why the requests that they're putting on you are disconnected from the priorities you've set with them, right? So they may have what I like to call scatterbrain, right? We get overwhelmed at times as managers and we're all over the place. Sometimes we need to just be leveled off again. These are very important, but they're delicate issues to bring up with your manager. I fully acknowledge doing so could be uncomfortable, but avoiding them or neglecting to discuss them with your manager will likely cause more harm than good before they get out of control. But if you do it in a selective, constructive manner, this could be one of the most effective strategies that you could have in the managing up process, because most managers will appreciate you taking the initiative to have a tough conversation before it becomes a bigger issue for them. And then lastly, don't rely on the advocacy of your boss alone. This is another one I personally experienced a lot, and notably in that situation I mentioned to you earlier. Having a good relationship with your direct boss is important, but don't overestimate the advocacy of one person. Your manager's boss, their peers, they all need to see your value. So consider asking your boss to have quarterly skip level meetings with his or her boss to get additional visibility with them, or even ask for other opportunities that might give you some exposure with the broader organization and senior leadership. If you aspire to continue rising through the ranks, you must be more and more cognizant as you evolve of your perception up, across, and throughout the organization. And then lastly, so if you don't mind moving forward, Amanda, since I've learned how to effectively manage up and incorporated this into my career development strategy, I've been able to reignite my career progression from the example I set forth at the beginning. I attribute that in large part to the strong relationships I've had with my bosses. I've been able to help them succeed, and I've really made their lives a lot easier along the way. And this has led me to getting increased autonomy, more empowerment in my role, greater exposure to senior leadership, and several promotions and career opportunities even outside of my organization once those managers moved on. Having employees who effectively manage up also benefits your employer. So if you think about you're doing this and you don't know how the impact it's going to have on your company, it's been shown that managing up effectively provides greater productivity to an organization, higher employee engagement and morale, and it helps them retain their best talent, which is really, really important. So regardless of where you are in your own career, I would strongly advocate for creating your own managing up plan. It may take time, but it's worth it in the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Next up is Patricia to discuss broadening skill sets and adapting in an innovative environment. Patricia?
Hi guys, I'm Patricia. Amanda, I think I have a slide that was provided. Thank you. Most of this already went through, so I graduated Marist in 2012. I majored in computer information systems and I minored in business administration. I got recruited early on in my senior year to work at Fidelity Investments, which I still currently work at. It's my 9th year. I started as a mainframe developer there. I was a developer there for 3 years. Went through the training program, relocated to the New Hampshire, Boston area. So I was actually part of the Boston Alumni Chapter for a little bit before moving back closer to home, which is Pennsylvania, New Jersey. 3 years into my development career, there was a career transition that I had, which I will talk about a little bit. I became a technology project manager in 2015. A project manager had chosen to retire, and there was no backfill for that position. At that time, I had kind of always decided I wasn't going to be a programmer forever. It's not what I really wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So one of the developers kind of nudged me on the side, was like, hey, I think you might be good for this role here. So I told my manager, I'll fill in for those meetings for now. I'll try my best. We'll see how it goes. Fast forward, it's 2021. I am a advanced certified Scrum Master and also a certified project management professional. So some of those certifications are listed. Just because you're certified doesn't mean anything. You could be fully functioning at that role without certifications as well. I currently manage 2 teams at Fidelity. They're both within brokerage tax technology. Next slide, Amanda. So what I was going to talk about was using your skill sets. You might not really know what you want to go into yet. Kind of finding those steps into finding your ultimate groove and what you want to do. I thought about this, took the top 10 takeaways and listed them here, and I'll have examples as well. So number 1 would be find your inner motivation to keep learning, adapting, and changing with what's current. Everything's always changing, no matter what. If they say that the only constant is change, so continue to explore and do your research. I would say yes to motivation, because technology evolves quickly, but so does the way that we work. If you can tell, we're in a pandemic. So clearly the companies who have chosen to work from home and video, you have to adapt with what the situation is no matter what, or else you might not survive. One of the examples is I started as a mainframe developer. Anybody that knows mainframe, I'm not even sure if they teach it at Marist anymore. It's a very old technology. What's new is cloud computing. So a lot of these big firms that, big insurance firms, finance, huge data storage companies are moving off the mainframe and into the cloud, as we are, as well as Fidelity. So the ability to be agile and change with that, maybe taking what your skills are and seeing how you can learn to apply that to that new change. As well as discipline, motivation, I would say it's not always going to be motivation, it's going to be discipline, which there is a difference, right? Because it's not always going to come to you. You're going to have to go and chase it. So I like the saying of head down, eyes forward. So you stay focused. You might not like what you're doing, and you just kind of have to keep walking through until you know what you want to do. Number 2 would be aim higher and take charge of your career. An example would be managing your expectations with your manager. So I had a manager who was actually currently now he's been promoted to my vice president. He was just so busy that I never had one-on-ones with him. I would see him in the hallways. He'd just say, hey, Patricia, how you doing? And I'm like, am I supposed to have one-on-ones with you? Like, am I supposed to talk about what I'm supposed to be doing with my career? He's not gonna schedule those with you. You have to schedule them with him. It's important for you to think about where you want to be and what you want, whether that's breaking that into a 5-year plan. If 5 years seems too long, maybe 1 year, where you want to be in 1 year. 1 year goes by pretty fast. If you can't foresee what that's going to be, try 3 months. The next thing I have is number 3, be humble and work your way up to prove yourself. Typically, you should be performing at the next level for some time before asking or expecting a promotion. great things take time. I don't really believe in the get rich fast strategy. You know, people always say, play stupid games, you'll win stupid prizes. So, you know, there's always a twist to those. I would say do your full-time job for a little bit. You might not, you know, that might not be what you want to do long term, but as Eric had said, your 20s are a lot about keeping focused on maybe making enough money until you kind of finally decide you can get on your feet and branch off and start doing things as a side and then doing what you really like to do. So have patience there. Number 4, I would say voice your goals and steps to achieve those goals with your managers so they can help you. A great manager should not only just manage you, but you also manage them. So you should voice what you want out of your career and how are they going to fight for you to support you within your career. You should be a good fit for your company, but also they should be a good fit for you. So open every path and expand your opportunities there. Number 5, be open to new platforms, new technologies, new ways of thinking, and new processes. That also relates to number 1. Number 6, use and emphasize your strengths, but recognize what your weaknesses are and work on them. Be open to constructive criticism. So I will share a story that I talk about pretty often. When I was interviewing with a company at Marist, they had actually asked me, what are your weaknesses? And this was probably one of the first interviews I had ever been on for full time. And of course you want to look good, right? I was like, I don't think of any weaknesses. I don't think I have any right now. I think I'm a great candidate for your company. And he put me on the spot. He's like, really? So you're perfect. You don't have any weaknesses. And I look at that, 10 years down the road, and you really have to own up to, it might not be a mistake, but anything that you've learned from. If it's not an opportunity, it's a lesson. So really own whatever weakness you have, and say that you're currently working on it, right? There should be a plan on how you're working on it. Or no one likes to hear, I'm perfect. And then another thing that goes with that is emphasize your strengths. So I love math and I'm a very, very logical thinking type of person. But so that was software development, and then kind of transitioned that into something else where I love to plan and have communication skills utilized. Number 7 would be connect with others who may serve as a mentor to you. And you might not know who those are in the beginning. Fidelity is really great with that because we actually have every other Tuesday, not off, but we call them learning days. And that day is for you to learn. It's usually they tell you not to schedule your weekly meetings that day. Meet with somebody else and learn something new. You might want to learn a new technology, a new business unit. We have something called a cohort. So I was paired with another project manager, and I was hoping to learn from another business unit. However, we actually just met last week, and I found out that she was actually hired during the pandemic, so she hasn't even been to the office. She's only been working with the company for 1 month. So in turn, I'm actually going to be teaching her a little more than she's going to be teaching me. One of the things that I did there was, instead of saying, you know what, I quit. I don't want to do this with her anymore. I'm not going to learn anything from her. I'm going to continue doing those sessions because she's going to learn from me, and hey, I might learn from her. What I did was I reached out to the people who paired me up, and I said, hey, I'm willing to take on another hour each week with somebody else so I could maybe learn from someone tenured at the company. Was hoping to learn from a different business unit. I think I had seen on the questions beforehand was, how would you kind of go about finding that mentor and asking them for their time? A virtual cup of coffee would be great. Something, pinging someone, or even asking your manager, hey, do you even know anybody that comes to mind who would be willing to teach me? They might think of someone within a different unit or have a friend outside of the company that you could pair with and learn from. Number 8 would be keep your bridges connected. And I purposely did not say burn your bridges because I don't really like saying that. People remember how you treat them, and that's inside and outside of the work environment. So, you know, I think that's something that sticks with me personally, is if someone takes the time to be nice and go out of their way to help you, you'll always remember that. And if you instill that in yourself, people will always remember that with you. Number 9, I had written obtain diplomatic characteristics. So as a project manager, I always have to remain fairly neutral. And there's some heated conversations sometimes when people disagree, and learning how to not take sides and manage the conversation and take drive in that, following what they're talking about, but also just having them cool off and tone it down a little bit. It's never good to pick sides or point fingers. So always remaining fairly diplomatic, neutral, writing down what the facts are. And number 10, lastly, would be an advocate for yourself and your team. Always be proactive. I always find it helpful when, there's no I in team. So when there's team leaders on the teams that I manage, I think someone had said, volunteer for opportunities if they come up. Throw yourself in there, be a leader, get yourself to offer help for other people, because not only does it help you, but it helps the other person. It's very rewarding in the end when you help other people, especially if they're on your team. You're going to help them become better, but in return, it's going to make your whole team better, and it's going to make it easier for you as well. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. That was fantastic. Next up is Greg to talk about career development. Greg?
Sure. Thank you, Scott. So for many people, 28 years sounds like a lifetime, and it is. It's hard to believe or imagine that you could be in one job with one employer for 28 years. As I looked at the meeting, I saw we still have some are listening in, and as weird as it is, I have been in the same employer for longer than you've been alive. Weird. It's probably just as weird for you as it is for me. But I know that spending an entire career at one employer may not be the standard for today, but it was something that I wanted. I thought that there would be stability in the position. I have friends that have different or hybrid opinions. One friend that I met along the way thought that she would only be at the company for 2 or 3 years, then move on. As it turns out, her life changed. There was a lot of support that she felt in the company, and she has decided to stay and build a career, and she's done very, very well and will continue to do well. I have another friend who's in her 30s who said, no, I can't do that. I want to control my destiny, and I will make my decisions as to when I move and where I move. So you can see there are any number of options, and certainly our panel has shared their insight on what motivated them to make the moves. One of the eye-openers for me in building my career at DuPont was 2 or 3 years in. My manager said to me, no one knows you. Go through a downsizing, it's easier to downsize someone we don't know than someone we know. So what I want you to do is get out there. I'm not saying that you have to ring a bell or brag. She said your work will speak for itself. But because no one knows you, I'm encouraging you to go out there. So I sought other opportunities. There was an opportunity to be part of one of the facilitators for a diversity and respectful work environment. I did that for a few years, and now I have that additional skill set. Coincidentally, Patricia, there are skills that I learned in there that you touched on about being diplomatic. There is a way that we speak in corporate America. I built a sensitivity to that and awareness because of my involvement with the diversity and respectful work environment program. So yeah, I would echo your sentiment there. For me, most of my development has been results oriented. Eric talked about that, talked about being detailed or big picture. What are you? My job shifts daily. So I am in the weeds, planting seeds, and then I've got to pick my head up and look at the horizon so that I can then anticipate. And it is that ability throughout my career that has enabled me to managers' jobs easier because one, I'm getting the job done, but I'm also saying, hey, there's some headwinds coming. You have to look out for what's coming, or these are the consequences if we don't address these issues. That doesn't happen if you're not the subject matter expert. So immerse yourself in what you do, have command of what it is you do. And there are two things. It's what we do and how we do it. And you really have to be a master at both. But these were all easy for me because I thought I had a cool job. My job, I started as a paralegal and I stepped into this new role, and it really weaves between business decisions and the legal environment. So I'm constantly weaving in between those two, drawing from both in solutions. One of the other comments that we talked about, I think Ed was mentioning, don't just come up with questions or problems, you have to have answers. When I was asked to lead the group, one of my introductory comments to everyone was, if there's a problem, we can't hide it. And my bet is about 80, or you're either 80 or 90% on the way to solving that problem. So in addition to talking about what just happened, we need to talk about how we're going to fix the situation. So there was that sense of empowering the people that were working in the group, and the absolute trust that you build with them. It was really kind of serendipitous that I was asked to lead the group. We went through an analysis of the different job functions, and I got a call from who would become my boss, who said, we have to make some changes. And this is my plan. I want you to lead the group. Can that happen? Clear and quick. Yes, we can do that. There's no question, no hesitation. And that's because I was the subject matter expert. And I had gone from being in the weeds to looking out into the horizon to see what we could anticipate. And then 2 years into that role, in my review with my boss, I did say, we're 2 years into this experiment and there have been no explosions, no problems. So it was the right decision. That also changed the dynamic of our working relationship, because then he had to admit, yeah, it did work. My ability to do that job when it was given to me made his job easier. And certainly I've understood that my ability to do the job makes my boss's job easier. And when my boss's job is easier, he's happy with it. So now we're 5.5 years into my role at that opportunity doesn't come. That has to do with building a reputation. Patricia touched on treating people well. I would suspect people, I would suspect most people don't remember the exact details of what you did when working together, but what they do recall over time is what the experience was. Did I leave working with Greg or Patricia with a positive feeling, or was it horrible because everything was a disaster? So to the extent that we bring order where there's chaos and can laugh at problems, but still solve them, those are recipes for success. If anyone has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, team. I know Scott has been collecting questions, so I'm going to let him jump right into those.
All right. Yeah, we've got, if everyone can hear me, I want to make sure I can pull up the question window here. Right. So, and I think, Patricia, this might be one for you to field. Are certified Scrum Master positions geared towards developers?
It can be geared towards anybody. I was a developer. I think certified Scrum Master positions are more of the agile way of thinking. So if you are going into project management, you might be familiar with the waterfall way, which is how a lot of companies were. You have like gathering requirements for whoever knows how long, 2 months, and then it's like a technical design for a month, and then development for a month, and then testing is 2 months, and then you go into production. Agile is quicker. We work in 2-week time frame, so we're kind of putting out output every 2 weeks. Certified Scrum Master, we've got analysts going for those. We've got project managers going for those, software developers going for them. It's a quicker certification. It's, I think, a 2-day training, which, you know, anybody, as long as you take the training, you can take the exam. Just because you become a certified Scrum Master, like I said, doesn't mean that the role is more prestigious than somebody who is just doing the job without a certification. I think it often comes with experience.
Great, great. This one I think is, you know, probably all of us could field a little bit, but how do you navigate a toxic work environment while holding on to your job insanity? So I'll let, if anyone wants to take a swing at that. If not, I can chime in too with my, not as long as Greg, but I've been out pretty close.
So I can add some insight on that. And in all honesty, my organizational behavior classes certainly help navigate that, because when you move into a group, you understand the group, but you begin to observe the group dynamics. Who's the troublemaker? Who's the vocal one? And certainly who the troublemaker is, or who the toxic one is. I avoided toxic people. I always tried to contain the conversation to just work related and results oriented, rather than get sucked into the vortex of that negativity and toxicity.
I think we could probably do a whole webinar on toxic work environments, but that's a great answer. Thanks. What skills can be updated to help improve marketability in this job market? So if there's any specific skills that have, you know, really kind of jumped out.
I think I don't think there's one set skill, because it might depend on what market you're looking at, but the ability to learn and ask questions, ask for help, learn. There's never going to be a situation where you sit down, someone's going to give you a job, and, you know, you're going to do it perfectly. So I think just you know, digging in and finding someone who can help you and asking for help.
Yeah, I might be able to add additional input to that. So I think in any industry right now, in any job, if you can interact digitally, I think that's so key right now. You know, I work in a field where financial services, where we have a very traditional sales model, and you know, we have a whole wholesaling force. And wholesaling, for those of you who don't know, is essentially external salespeople who talk to clients. And they've been operating of travel, take their briefcase, go travel to people's offices, talk to in person, have lunch, you know, entertain them at events, and that world is gone right now. And how do you engage with people digitally is a key skill that I think most people do not have, and were forced to adapt when the pandemic hit. So, but I do think as we continue to read about how the world would change after this chaos, having those digital skill sets in whatever function, whatever industry you have, certainly would be beneficial. I imagine Eric, being in the industry that he's in, and certainly the work that he's doing, would be a beneficiary to that. But you know, I'm thinking more broadly, even in regards to, you know, basic engagement.
Great. This one came through the chat. How are contractors and job hoppers perceived inside your companies and organizations? But if you don't mind, I'll kick this off, because I switched from a big four to a small tech startup, and almost everybody at the tech startup came from other tech startups. So they're all a year here, a year there. But at the big four, at Deloitte, you had people who did 10, 20, 30 years, and you didn't go 6 months or whatever. But depending on the industry, it's the perception's very, very different. So in the startup world, the assumption is if you've been at other startups, a lot of them fail. So you're going to move on, 6 months or a year later, you're going to jump onto another one. So there's no stigma attached to it in that field as so much as like an old school like Deloitte. But I don't know if anyone else's experience has been different.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same actually, and I think that a lot of companies are okay with it. It's viewed as very favorable. We have projects that aren't our key business model but need to get done, that are tech based or operationally based, and we want to hire the right people to come in and do them, but that's not what we do. So we embrace consultants and contractors open arms, and they get treated just like everyone else, and it's a very favorable situation for all parties, and we get the job done with contractors. Because right now we had to go through furloughs. We did a whole lot during COVID, but the one thing that kept us going was we knew that we had some contractors that we had to lean on to get big things done. So don't if whoever asked that, I think it's Amanda.
No, Amanda just fed it to us. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, Amanda. There's no negative stigma in tech, advertising, marketing, social media, or the like around that.
Yeah.
Scott, DuPont is very old. It can be perceived as very conservative, but we use contractors all the time. An anecdote, we were interviewing someone once who had an abrupt stop to her career, and we saw a gap. So that was a natural question. Well, my husband thought that if there was any other time for us to do it, this was the time. So we traveled. The post conversation after that candidate left, everyone around the table said, "Wow, what a cool opportunity." Subsequent, and then we had a conversation with her, because I was working with her, and she said, "I really thought that was going to be a problem." So I got to tell you, everyone around the table thought it was really cool. Like this was the golden opportunity, and you took it.
No, I'd agree that I don't think that those kind of older stigmas really apply anymore. That it's been a very different kind of the questions and the answers that you used to run into in interviews don't seem to really kind of crop up as often. So
yeah, Scott, if you don't mind, I just want to add two cents on that, because that job hopping point is something I struggled with in the early part of my career. In my first 10 years, I jumped around quite a bit, and I always asked myself that question. And I actually thought that it benefited me. And that's how I positioned it when I talked to employers, because I would say, well, one, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do in my career, how I can benefit organizations. But being exposed to 3 or 4 companies in the first 10 years of your career also exposes you to different cultures, size of company, industries. And now I look back now, that's something that my current employer looks very favorably upon, right? They don't like the fact that a lot of people in their organization are kind of stuck in their culture. They want to change things. So they brought in people that have backgrounds of different types of organizations that have been successful. So I just want to kind of point that out as you go through your career. You obviously don't want to change your job every year, but at the same point in time, moving different spots is not necessarily a negative like it may have been perceived in the past.
No, I'd agree. There's one more question here that kind of touches on a very similar type of thing. Moving from a small firm to possibly something along the lines of a big four. what kind of challenges should be expected to come with that? So these all seem to be bucketed in kind of those cultural things. I don't know from everyone else's experience, if you went from a small organization to a big one, doesn't necessarily have to be the big four, but I actually went to Deloitte, like, so from my experience coming from like a firm of like 300 people to one of 105,000, there's probably a lot of overuse of the word culture. When you have a company that big, it's tough to really have a culture. It's more of, you've got offices that have a culture, or business units that operate a certain way, and that they have a way of doing things. Especially Big Four, which are basically different businesses between consulting and audit and tax, are very, very different, career paths and what have you. So probably the biggest thing is all of the underlying themes everyone's mentioned. Working hard, networking is probably the key thing that we always talked about. You've got to build a network both inside the firm and with your clients to make sure that you're tagged to that next project and constantly demonstrating your value proposition to a firm like that. And that's how you really kind of get successful. You're going to put yourself in positions to do interesting work. So any other questions? We're almost at time here. So
I saw one come in, if you don't mind me asking. I think it's possibly for Ed and or Patricia, talking about dealing with non-communicative manager. If you have any strategies for dealing with someone who's non-communicative.
That's a really good question, because it's hard in the talk that I gave around managing up, where you're trying to get information if you have somebody who doesn't like to communicate. I'll go back to the first point that I highlighted, though, is understanding communication preferences, right? There's different ways that managers like to or prefer to engage with you, right? Some are just completely overwhelmed, or they may be introverted and they're just very set in their ways on how they like to communicate. I think asking them, and hopefully they're able to communicate to you back how they prefer to be engaged, and it may be less frequent, but if you can get that, one-on-one meeting, half hour per week, that's something I do with my entire team. I have a global team of 20 people, and getting them on the calendar for at least a half hour to an hour per week is something that I strive for. Somebody who doesn't exactly have the strongest communication skills as a manager, I think it takes a little bit more work, but peeling out what their needs, what their preferences are, would probably be my best advice.
I would say you could come up with a plan with them if you're struggling to, maybe it's like, well, what am I doing wrong? And they're not really giving you constructive criticism. But then when it comes to performance time, you're getting, a mid rating and not the excellent. And you're like, well, you didn't, the manager's not speaking up on what you could do to further yourself. Coming up with a plan with them and saying, what are the next steps that I'm going to need to get this promotion? And, what do you expect out of me then? Chances are sometimes, management is hard. And I think when you see a lot of new managers, it's like they all have their different style, and it's really, chances are that you're not the only one that they're managing. So they're dealing with all these different types of emotional intelligence that they have to figure out with each of the people that they manage, right? So finding how you like to be managed, as well as that middle ground of how you want to communicate with them, would probably be the best. Coming up with a plan, and then also having maybe a 360 management where you're also asking other people that you work with and having them sit in with your manager, and just having, it doesn't have to be like a one-on-one, it could just be a casual conversation.
And I know it's 5, but kind of a question that goes along with that. What is the best way to start that conversation or indicate that you'd like to have one? Do you bring it up in a meeting? Do you send an email? Again, anyone can answer it, but I don't know.
I would think that part of every organization has to be at least an annual review. At DuPont, we have a minimum of 2. I've always said to people that the door's open. We need to talk. We shouldn't wait.
And keep them accountable, right? make sure that you're saying, okay, I'll check with you next month, or I'll check when's a good time to follow up in 2 weeks, and make sure you type your notes and write it down and make sure that you reflect it with them and be like, this is what we talked about this week. So next time we have this action item, I'm going to work on it. Let's check on it next time.
Yeah, one closing thought on that would be, this is your career. You're not predicated on what your manager does. Like, if you feel like you need something more, don't be bashful or hesitant to do that, right? Ask for a quarterly, hey, one of our one-on-ones through a quarter, I'd like to talk about career development. I'd like to talk about what it's going to take to get promoted to the next level. Just dedicated to that, not project work, right? You have the authority and empowerment to do that as an employee. Don't fear it because you're fearful of how your manager will react to that.
Thank you all. That is all the time we have for today because it's a little after 5 already. So thank you to Eric, Ed, Patricia, and Greg. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences and your expertise with us. I know some of you still have questions. We will be sending an email out to everyone who participated and or registered for this event with a copy of this if you want to go back and review anything. And it will also include contact information for the panelists here, either their email addresses or their LinkedIn profile. So you can connect with them, network with them, and if your question didn't get answered, you can do that. We coordinated this event today with the Office of Career Services. So if you want to get in touch with them because you have any questions, you need help with networking, especially if you are a student, I will put their email address in the chat here. It's just careerservices@marist.edu. They're a really, really wonderful resource, and they can help you get connected with other people in your field. As I said, the full recording of this presentation will be available within the next few days, and we'll send that out to you. You can find that and any other of our previous events at the link in the chat there. And that is all I have for you today. So thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you again to our wonderful panelists and to you, Scott. I know I didn't name you earlier, but thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Appreciate
have
it.
a good evening.